If you don't like being called a person who menstruates, then simply stop menstruating, fivehead. Well, okay, so there has been this kerfuffle on Twitter right now about that we've already done this a couple times. Like JK Rowling also a couple years ago already decided like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a whole tiff over the medicalized terminology of like a person who menstruates or a person with a uterus. And like women get all butthurt about this, like cis women get all butthurt about this because they I don't know, they feel like their personhood is only affirmed when you call them women, I guess. Like the idea that they are a person who has a type of organ, like they feel really degraded by that for some reason. They really do feel like, oh, you're reducing me as a woman down to my vagina or like down to my uterus. And it's like, no, like you're really kind of the one doing that. Like, so, I mean, we've already been having this conversation for years. And then Anna Kasparian comes in, she works for the Young Turks. You might know her from that clip that went viral several years ago about how like, you know, she's just going off about how she doesn't follow a religion. And so if you have a religion that says you can't get an abortion, then you can go ahead and do that. But why does that have anything to do with her? Like she really went off and it was a great video. But then like she comes up with this week, I'm a woman. Please don't ever refer to me as a person with a uterus, birthing person, or person who menstruates. How do people not realize how degrading this is? You can support the transgender community without doing this. I just don't really have any respect for this position. Like, okay, here's a lot of the problems with this. First of all, a person with a uterus is not synonymous with a woman. There are women who are born female who just happen to not have a uterus because they were born in such a way as they don't have one. They are still women, right? There are people who have uteruses who are not women because they are transgender. That's fine. There are also people who have uteruses who are children and are not women. A 10-year-old who has a uterus is not a woman, and it's really weird and creepy. The insistence that any person who has a uterus is a woman, because not only is it misgendering to trans people who are not women who happen to have uteruses and are able to get pregnant, but it also like is weirdly, you know, taking children and conferring them the status of adulthood because of what organs they possess. And it's like fucking really weird to do that, right? Like, I don't understand why cis women think that, you know, the idea that in a medical setting we could be accurate with our terminology and say a person with a uterus. There are cis men who have uteruses and go their entire lives without knowing it. Yeah, I mean, there are people who do have internal organs that they're not aware of. You might have ovotestes and not be aware of it. You might have a uterus inside your body and not be aware of it because it just doesn't really do anything. It just sits in there. This is about who needs access to what medical care. No one is out there saying, oh, you know, did you see that person with a uterus walking down the street? Did you see that birthing person walking down the street? Or like when you come into the medical office, they don't say like, oh yes, this is Anna. Anna is a person who menstruates who is coming here to have a pregnancy test done. Your womanhood is still going to be affirmed on an individual basis. But when we're talking about who needs access to medical care, it is accurate to say that a person who menstruates needs access to tampons. A person who has a uterus and doesn't menstruate would need access to tampons. Like, listen, you're talking about several different things that could be all like the categories that she even has listed here are not mutually inclusive with each other. Not only are they not mutually inclusive with womanhood, a person with a uterus might not be a person who menstruates, and a person with a uterus might not be a birthing person. And so these categories are not mutually inclusive. There is a pretty big overlap between, like, there's a fairly big overlap between people who identify as women, people who we would call women, and people who menstruate and have uteruses and give birth. But there's not like a full overlap. It's not true of all women that they are these things, and it's not true of all people with uteruses that they are women. I don't really get how it's degrading. Like, I really think it's stupid when cisgender women object to being called people. And she's acting like this is somehow a new discussion. This has been years old. This is a cold take even amongst gender criticals. What's degrading is being forced to submit to misgendering in order to access care. Like, and people talk about there being confusion. Oh, you're going to confuse people. There are some people who are English second language who, if you say people with cervixes, like, they might not even know that they have a cervix. So it would be better for them if you say women. Do you understand that transgender men sometimes can't access healthcare because like can't access screening for ovarian cancer, or can't access regular kind of pap smears, or can't find a gynecologist who will help them maintain their pregnancy. Like if you're a trans man and you're on testosterone and you find that you're pregnant and you realize you want to keep it, if you as a man with a beard and go into a gynecological office to be tested, there's a lack of training of the people who work there. They won't necessarily know, oh, you're a transgender man, you have a uterus, and so you need this care. If you constantly equivocate, womanhood equals uterus equals woman. You have people like Robert Eads who will just die. Robert Eads had ovarian cancer, and there were like 27 doctors who denied him care. And they were pretty much universally like, well, if you think you're a man, maybe this will teach you a lesson that actually, you're a woman. And like, they don't want men in their doctor's offices. They'll say things like, well, you'll freak out all the women who are in here. We can't have a man in our waiting room. And what you're proposing at the end of the day is that the word woman always equals a person with a uterus, and like literally defining women by their wombs. It's so weird when people come around back on this. They're like, how can you reduce me down to my uterus, calling me a person with a uterus? And it's like, you're the one who's reducing womanhood down to having a uterus. I'm saying that any person could have a uterus, and that's no bearing on who they are intrinsically as a person. What you're saying is that having a certain type of organ means that you aren't necessarily this type of person. Just rename them to broveries, truly. Someone who speaks English as a second language might not know the word appendix. What do they do if they get appendicitis? Right. People with appendices. And exactly, Spider. There is a difference between identity, which is woman, and description, which is having a uterus. No one is going out there and saying, Anna, you're not allowed to call yourself a woman anymore. They're saying like, this is a type of healthcare. Like, if you don't menstruate, you don't need tampons. This is just about attempting to be accurate. You need access to abortion care if you can get pregnant. So you can just say, like, anyone who can get pregnant is losing their rights in this country. Anyone who can get pregnant has lost their right to bodily autonomy in this country. And that would be accurate. If you say women have lost their rights, like, you realize that this makes infertile cis women feel terrible. Like, the insistence that a woman is a person with a uterus who menstruates and who is capable of giving birth. Like, women who are infertile literally feel inadequate as women because of this view. Like, this hurts everyone involved. The only people that it helps is like white women who don't have any real problems in their lives. I mean, truly, as a white woman who is like a media personality who probably makes more than enough money, how about you get some real problems, Anna? You can pay for an abortion, Anna. You can pay however much money is required to travel across the country to get an abortion if you lived somewhere where it wasn't legal. You don't have any real problems. You're sitting here bitching about the terminology that we use to be inclusive toward trans people in the middle of a rampant attempt to genocide us out of this country. In the middle of a rampant deconstruction of our rights. You're sitting here bitching about the terminology that is used to be accurate in a medical setting. Fucking cry harder. Yeah, the left has banned the word women, actually. You're not allowed to call yourself a woman anymore, Anna. If that's what you think that we're doing, then sure, that's what we're gonna buckle down on. You're no longer allowed to call yourself woman. You're no longer part of the club. You can't sit with us. I can't say that because I'm not a woman either, Anna, join me in the not being a woman. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, true. Yeah, it's war on Christmas energy for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really good argument. It's not hurting women to say people with uteruses any more than it's hurting Christmas to say happy holidays. If you're a woman who has a uterus, then you are included in the phrase people with uteruses. You're no longer centered in the discussion. You're literally having the same screaming, pissing, shitting yourself meltdown that conservatives have regarding you not saying Merry Christmas. Like, if the conservative says Merry Christmas to you and you say Happy Holidays to them, they shit themselves. And so, yeah, congratulations, Anna, you have become a reactionary. Several days later.
Jasmine Bryant says, neither trans people or any organization that fights for us wants to refer to you as a birthing person. The language is used in a general sense to include trans men when a general statement is needed. When I'm reading about my rights being stripped away from me by the federal government, and when I'm reading quotes from the Democratic Party that failed to protect my reproductive rights, it adds insult to injury to read not women, but birthing people. I don't want to ever be referred to as a birthing person under any circumstance. I find it offensive. I respect the transgender community. I just ask that they also respect how other people want to be referred to. Person with a uterus, person who menstruates, birthing people. I just find it incredibly demeaning. And I'm allowed to feel that way. I don't think that that's transphobic at all. I will fight to the death for equal rights for the transgender community, period. And we've been doing that on this show. But respect goes both ways. It's that simple.
That's literally the don't call me cis argument. Like, I had to take off the glasses so that you could see the degree to which I was rolling my eyes. It's literally the same argument as saying, like, I'm a normal woman, don't call me cisgender. I mean, I just don't, we've already talked about this a little bit this week. I have no respect for this position. Like, where, my rights are being taken away. As if I didn't cry the day that I woke up on the day that Roe v. Wade was struck down. Like, as though I didn't fucking bawl and have to go to my partner and say, like, it's fucked up that I woke up today with fewer rights than I went to sleep with last night. It's fucked up for all of us. And she doesn't understand that her insistence that calling them women's rights and women's access to care, even when abortion was legal and even when all these things were legal, trans men were being denied care. So if you say, oh, I'm an ally to the trans community, I will fight to the death for trans rights, like, you're not actually. You're saying, like, my rights as a woman have been lost and that's the priority right now, completely ignoring the fact that the rights of all trans men and non-binary people, like, all of us were affected by this. And it's like fucked up when your rights got lost as well and people are actively saying, like, it doesn't matter that your rights are gone now. Like, that's literally what we're being told, is that, like, it doesn't matter that our rights were lost as well. It matters more that cis women feel like they're not being centered in the conversation. But I wrote, hey, Anna Kasparian, with respect, have you ever heard of Robert Eades? He was a trans man who died of ovarian cancer because of the idea that only women have uteruses and need access to reproductive health care. The opinions that you've been espousing are the same ones that led to his death. He was denied care by 27 doctors. I think that that's true. I haven't looked it up in a bit because they didn't want to have him in their offices scaring the women there. Or honestly, really, it was just to teach him a lesson, because if he was a man, then why would he need that type of reproductive care? They wanted him to die a woman's death, like, i.e. they wanted to teach him a lesson. Nowadays, trans men are still denied care because of the idea that only women need abortion access and pap tests. Trans men lost their rights too when Roe fell. Just like Christians aren't hurt when we say happy holidays to acknowledge non-Christians, cis women aren't hurt when we acknowledge that many kinds of people have uteruses and need access to abortion and birth control. Women are people, some women have uteruses and some don't. Sometimes it's accurate to just say women are affected by this, and in other cases it's more accurate to say people with uteruses are affected by this. Just wanted to clearly and respectfully explain so that you can see the opposing side without hostility. If you are 24 or older, Robert Eades died in your lifetime. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Was it really? Was it like 1999? Really? I haven't looked it up in a bit. Yeah, wow, holy shit. He died in January 1999. This is the problem that I have when we're having these discussions, is that cis women like Anna just think, oh, it doesn't really matter beyond the fact that I don't like being called this. They really just, they do think this is just a situation where you like being called something and I don't like being called that. So we just need to respect what people like being called. Oh, so for those of you in the chat who don't know, I'm so sorry. Robert Eades was a transgender man. He was born in 1945 and he was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So he transitioned later in life. So he had ovarian cancer and was diagnosed in 1966. He went to like over a dozen doctors. This doesn't state an exact number, I don't think. He went to a number of different doctors, was denied care over and over and over again, and finally he died of ovarian cancer in 1999, like 3 years later. 3 years. He could still be alive. Like, he was born in 45. Like, he could be in his 70s right now. Oh, did I say 1966? I'm so sorry. He was diagnosed in 1996. He would be in his 80s now. Yeah, so actually, I guess he was accepted for treatment in 1997. So he wasn't denied care for 3 years. He was denied care for 1 year, which was enough time for the ovarian cancer to metastasize. And that means, like, when the cancer, spreads to other parts of the body. But, like, people die. when you really double down on the idea that only women need access to this care, you end up with situations where this happens. And because Anna Kasparian is the type of person who thinks, oh, this is just an issue of what language we use, she's going to say things like, oh, well, me wanting to be called a woman and not a birthing person has nothing to do with trans men not getting access to care. You know, we should be able to give trans men access to care, even though we refuse to acknowledge them in the name of this type of care. What the fuck is with cis people blasting into the discourse with a 5-year-old moldy anti-trans talking point like they actually did something? That's another funny thing about this. Like, where did she come out with this? Like, seriously, if you were on the internet 3 or 4 years ago when JK Rowling was originally saying this, like, oh, you know, people who menstruate, I think there's a word for that. Is it weembao? Like, it's literally the same bullshit. Anna Kasparian, get caught up on the gender critical like she's literally gonna fall into that. It's gonna suck. And like then the Young Turks is gonna be, the frustrating thing is that it's not just right-wing organizations, and like the normalization of intense transphobia on the right is pulling the Overton window so that it's normalizing milder transphobia from the left. I really don't think this is a women's issue. I think it's human rights issue because people forget this hurts intersex and trans people. Right, there are intersex people who can get pregnant as well, and they may or may not identify as a woman. You really can't avoid people with uteruses because that's what the care is about, giving uterine-related health care to people with uteruses and minors. I responded to someone who was saying like, oh, everyone with a uterus is a woman. And I was like, oh, okay, so a 10-year-old with a uterus is a woman? And they were like, LOL, yeah, so every time I type this, I need to say women/girls, otherwise you dumb fucks will keep making the same argument. And I was like, well, if you're gonna continue to weigh in on a subject of pedantry, like if you're going to weigh in on a discussion about accuracy of terminology and speech, then yes, you need to speak precisely or get the fuck out of the conversation. What is wrong with you? Yeah, stop calling children women. It's disgusting. Women who have cancer and have to have a hysterectomy struggle with feelings of inadequacy because they are no longer able to bear children. Because the idea of what a woman is so heavily wrapped up in the idea that you have children. Like for some women, they've really divorced themselves from that idea. Good for you. I think Anna might even be one of those women, which is great. But there are other negative outcomes from this societally. Yeah, or if you were born without a uterus, you might also feel like less of a woman, like inadequate. You'll feel like there are going to be some, I mean, it's going to limit your partners, and that can make you feel inadequate if you know for sure, okay, a lot of men want a woman that they can have a child with. And so you know that there are going to be a number of men who, when you tell them that you don't have a uterus, they're going to dump you. And it's hard to disengage other people not valuing you from the idea that you don't have value. Happy April. Thank you so much to all of my Patreon supporters. And especially I want to shout out Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Danielle McDonald, Amanda B, R. Halverson, Sarah A, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Michelle Winter, Athiette, Jamie Jam, Wellington Marcus, Elizabeth Bartell, Nova, Sojo, Suzanne Maynard, Mr. Atheist, and Kevin Young.